everyone, my name is Angela, this is Paperbacks Galore, and today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. So far this year I have read 51 books, which is really good for me, and my goal is to read 100 books, so I'm definitely on track. I started off the year with 100 books on my physical TBR, and right now I'm at 70, so I am on track to meet my goal, which is to read 50 books off of my physical TBR. And not by very many. I'm doing really good. The first question is, what is the best book that you've read so far this year? And boy, do I have an answer for this. This is The Binding by Bridget Collins, and this is by far the best book that I have read so far this year. This book is really hard to pitch because I think that the best reading experience with this book is when you don't really know what it's about. So I'm just gonna give you some of the vibes and not tell you the plot because I think the plot itself should really come as a surprise. So we're in the English countryside in the 1800s, and this is a magical realism story. So it's like a historical fiction novel, except there's like one magical aspect of this book. And in this world, let's just say that books aren't just fictional stories that authors pen in order to elicit emotions from the reader. Books are something else. And our main character, Emmett, is a farm boy, and one day his parents tell him that he is going to be the apprentice to a bookbinder, and Emmett is very confused because books have always been very taboo. His parents have always told him to stay away from books, and bookbinding seems like a really weird thing for him to be told to do. So we follow Emmett as he goes on his bookbinding apprentice journey, and that's really all I want to say. I also want to add that there is a really special queer romance in this book. This is a new all-time favorite book. I loved it so much. You should read it. Don't read the synopsis. The next question is the best sequel that you've read so far this year. My answer for that is Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is the second book in the Farseer trilogy, and these books are basically like very classic medieval fantasy with swords and castles and plotting and assassins and scrolls. It's just like very classic. There are dragons eventually in this series, and I know that there are a lot more of the dragons in this world at some point, but this book is really more about war and politics and character dynamics, and there's some animal companion stuff that's really fun. Highly recommend this series. This book was so good. The next question is a new release that you haven't read yet but you still want to. My answer for this question is Old Flames and New Fortunes by Sarah Hogle. Sarah Hogle wrote one of my all-time favorite romance books called You Deserve Each Other, and this is her new like magical realism contemporary romance. I'm a little nervous about it because magical realism plus romance is not my favorite combination, but I have trust in my girl Sarah. The next question is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. For me, this is The Silence Factory by Bridget Collins, who's the author of my favorite book of the year, The Binding, and I actually already have this book as an e-arc on my Kindle. I'm just waiting for like the perfect moment and vibe to read this. I don't know much about it. I think that it is gothic. I think it's magical realism. I think there's going to be a little bit of horror maybe. The cover is kind of creepy. I know that it's set on an island, I think, and that's all I want to know. The next question is, what is your most disappointing book of the year? And to me, most disappointing means that you had really high hopes for it and then it didn't meet your expectations, not necessarily the absolute worst book you've read. So for me, the answer is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lynn Tan. I actually buddy read this with my friend Sarah, and she, I think, gave it 2 stars. I gave it 3 stars. This is a fantasy book that is kind of based off of Chinese mythology, and our main character is the daughter of the moon goddess, and she is separated from her mother, and she goes to a different part of this kingdom that she's unfamiliar with, and she has to hide her identity. Eventually she gets the chance to work with the emperor's son, and she learns magic and archery, and eventually she actually like does some fighting. And this book just felt really lifeless almost. Like it was like the descriptions of the setting were so beautiful and everything else was just so weirdly flat. I felt like the characters were some of the most flat characters I've ever read in a fantasy book, and it was just such a shame because, again, the setting and the magic and the world building were so stunning, but the characters and the plot were just so boring. So The 3 stars is really just for the fact that I really, really, really liked the setting, but even that isn't completely from the author's imagination. Like, obviously she's pulling from mythology, so I did not love this. On a more positive note, the next question is, what is your biggest surprise? And my biggest surprise this year has been Interesting Facts About Space by Emily Austen. I actually read this on audio on Everend, and I loved it so much that I had to go out and buy my own copy. This is a funny, sad contemporary fiction about a woman named Enid. Enid is obsessed with space. Enid is gay. Enid has a phobia of bald men. Enid has a mother who has some serious mental health issues. Enid has some complicated family dynamics with her half-sisters, and we just watch Enid over a period of like a few months, I think, and she's just dealing with her everyday life, with her phobias, with the people around her. There's a really sweet sapphic romance that comes about in a very unexpected way, and this is just so funny and relatable and emotional, but also it's like somehow dark and lighthearted at the same time, and I was just so engaged with this. I started annotating it, and I hardly ever annotate. I didn't finish, but I definitely will. I might actually reread this in December and annotate, but I don't know, something about this just like I felt like I needed to read it, and I'm so glad I did because I absolutely loved this book and I highly recommend this, especially on audio. The next question is a new favorite author. I'm choosing 2 because I can. One new favorite author of mine is definitely Kennedy Ryan, who wrote Before I Let Go, which was one of my first 5 stars of the year. This is a second chance romance about a Black couple in Atlanta who have gotten divorced, and they go on a journey of finding each other again, and they are co-raising some children. They have a restaurant together, and that synopsis, like, to me by itself doesn't really sound that good. Like, it's not something that I would usually pick up, but something about her writing and the setting and the character work is just incredible, and this has like a super high rating on Goodreads, and I think most people who pick this up will really love it. Do check the trigger warnings because there's some really sensitive and emotional topics that the main character is dealing with in this book, but I loved it. And I'm actually also reading her book Real, which is like a romance between an actress and a director, and they're filming this biopic of a Black performer who's kind of been like forgotten in history, and so far it's really, really fucking good. And then I have to mention Robin Hobb because I just know that I'm gonna read all of her books and she's gonna be like a constant part of my life, and I'm so excited to read more of her work. She has been exactly the kind of fantasy author that I've been searching for, and I'm so glad that I finally picked up her books, and I'm just so grateful that she exists in the world and published all these amazing books. The next question is, who is your newest fictional crush? I know a lot of booktubers find this question really weird, or like they don't know what to say. I'm interpreting this question as, who is your favorite book boyfriend or girlfriend, but for me it's boyfriend. And I think my answer is Justin from Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is actually my least favorite Abby Jimenez. I gave it 4 stars, whereas the previous 2 in her series I gave 5 stars, so a tiny bit disappointed that I didn't love this one as much. But I really did love Justin. I think Abby Jimenez does such a great job at writing men that are just like perfect, but also really specific, so they don't just feel like cardboard cutouts of like the perfect man. Justin was just so sweet, such a good man. There's a scene where he like takes care of the FMC when she's sick, and it's just like so sweet. So yeah, I think he sticks out in my mind as a new fave, but I don't really have like a crush. Next question is your newest favorite fictional character, and I thought about this for a bit, and I don't really have like a super strong one, but I would say I really connected with Rosemary from Here We Go Again by Alison Cochrane. This is a female-female romance that I listened to on audio. I really, really loved this. I gave it 4.5 stars. It wasn't quite perfect, probably because I liked one of the love interests like a lot more than the other, but Rosemary is very uptight and type A, and she's a teacher. She's very organized, she's very, very smart and passionate, and kind of anxious, but also just like really amazing. I really liked her, and she sticks in my mind. And then I know this is like the third time I'm holding up this book, but I think Fitz from the Farseer trilogy really sticks out as a favorite character. I mean, when you start out with the first book, he's literally 6 years old, and then by the end of the third one, he's, I think, in his early 20s, so you really get to know him and everything that's happened to him, so it's kind of hard not to feel really connected to him. The next question is a book that made you cry. I feel like I'm someone who cries pretty easily in books. However, I also kind of hate it because crying usually gives me like a bad headache, so I've kind of avoided it, but I will say that Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen. I listened to this on audio. This one made me cry. I think it was less about, well, okay, there was something about a cat that made me cry in this book because I love cats, and it made me cry. And then also just thinking about like death and mortality made me cry in this book. But I wasn't necessarily crying like for the characters. It just like made me think about my own life, and that made me cry. Still counts, but yeah. On the other hand, the next question is a book that made you happy. I feel like a lot of people are gonna say this book, but Funny Story by Emily Henry. This was a 5-star romance for me. Emily Henry is back. Not that she's been gone. Like, I also gave Happy Place. I also gave Happy Place 5 stars last year. But this is a story of Daphne and Miles, whose partners actually got together, leaving Daphne and Miles pretty miserable and also broke, so they are now roommates, and so they fall in love. Wow, that was the easiest time I've had giving that synopsis so far. Good job, Angela. Emily Henry's brain is amazing. She's so funny. She's so witty. Her characters are always so witty, and I definitely laughed out loud many times reading this book. It was really funny. Funny story, you know. It was funny. So yeah, Emily Henry's books always make me happy. The next question is, what is the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year? I've honestly done a really good job at not buying books. I think I've bought between like 7 and 10, and a few of those were books that I bought after I'd already read them, which is more what I want to start doing because I'm overwhelmed with my TBR. I'm not a special edition person, like I don't buy special editions, so unfortunately I'm not gonna have like an incredible answer, but I thought these two books were really stunning. These are the sequels to The Bear and the Nightingale, which is a fantasy book that I haven't read yet. I think if I had to pick just one, it would be this one. I just think it's absolutely beautiful, and I'm hoping to read these books either this year or like the beginning of next year. And the final question is, what is a book you need to read by the end of the year? I made a 24 books for 2024 video at the start of the year. I will link that if you want to see the books that I promised myself I would read, and I decided to just choose one that I've had for a while that I would be, well, okay. Basically, if I don't read this book this year, I'm gonna be sorely disappointed in myself. I've had this since spring of 2022. This is so many people's like favorite book, and I know it's gonna be excellent. I'm just very intimidated by it, and it is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is climate fiction. I believe it's kind of a combination of fantasy with some sci-fi. I know that part of it is written in like second person, and there's some kind of interesting reason why that is. This book intimidates me so much. I'm afraid that I'm not gonna get it the way that everyone else does, but I won't know until I try, so wish me luck. And that is the end of the tag. If you got to the end of this video, thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more bookish content from me, and I hope you have a lovely week.